Uh, Usually there's like probably like 5, 10 people, but I feel like if it helps one person, that's the whole room. Cool.
Nice.
People just and then there's like 8 people on YouTube and like 20 on Twitter. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I can do like a quick intro, but basically the point of this call was just to document some of my thoughts on AI consulting. Skylar has been a longtime friend of mine, over a decade now, right? Like 11 years. We started like doing machine learning stuff in like early 2012, 13. And now you're thinking about doing some more AI consulting work. And I'm only like a year ahead of you, but I think that's like almost perfect. It's like I think if someone is almost like 10 years ahead or 20 years ahead, it's hard to really get advice and have it be timely. But I think this is gonna be pretty helpful. So do you want to also introduce yourself and set some context, and then we can just jump into some questions?
Yeah, for sure. So spent a lot of my early career working at large scale consumer companies, working on a lot of different machine learning problems. So a lot of ad policy enforcement work at Google, a lot of search and recommendation at LinkedIn. And most recently, I've been working in the mental health field, working on developing machine learning based medical devices for measuring mental health. So it's been a lot of fun and working in a regulated space. And more recently, I'm VP of engineering and data science at a company called Health Rhythms. And as I started looking for sort of my next play, I started realizing there's a lot of companies that could use my skills. And so kind of interested in working on a variety of different problems rather than going so deep on just one company. And so excited to learn a little bit from you and your experience with consulting and how I can avoid all the mistakes that you may have made.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is just not understanding how much value you're providing and trying to capture that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've heard the story, but basically the first job I took, like March of last year, someone was like, how much do you want to charge? Like, oh, like 150, 170 an hour. Like, I'm really just trying to see what's going on. And like, okay, let's just do 170 then. I was like, oh, I fucked up. Anytime someone picks a higher amount, you're like, oh shit. Like just go. Like I didn't even give them the ability to pay me more money. They're just like, fuck, well, I have to say this number. But
yeah.
So I mean, one thing that's interesting, and I'm sure you're noticing this too, so there's a lot more AI stuff happening, but there's almost like way more tourism and way more hype. So it's actually hard to figure out what's what. And I think it's only a very small subset of people who, one, have experience, and two, want to leave. Like the MLEs at like the LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, all those places probably aren't going anywhere unless they're starting their own company. So there's kind of like a weird spot for a lot of the AI people where it's like, oh, if you're independent, you can actually have way more freedom to working these things.
Yeah.
What are your motivations? I'm actually curious. Like, is it just many problems, or is it?
Yeah, so I think there's a few motivations. I think a lot of the things that I do outside of work, I spend a lot of time helping to mentor and develop, like particularly students, people trying to break into ML, people trying really to develop into managers and leaders themselves. And, I am starting to think a lot about how to structure sort of my consulting angle. And like, really, I think the reality is a lot of companies who just don't have the resources internally to really develop a coherent like data or AI strategy. And they really feel the need and the value they can get from that. And I think the reality, everybody working in this space knows that, one, there's a lot of different things you need to know and understand to like build an end-to-end system that provides value. And the way a lot of your larger companies do that is through specialization. You have data engineers, machine learning engineers, analysts, et cetera, et cetera. And, small company like can't really afford that whole thing. But eventually if they do well, they start to be able to build out a team. And so the way I'm kind of thinking about like structuring my consulting services are really like, I want to focus on like helping companies have an internal engineering team, maybe don't have anybody who quite has the chops to like develop a coherent data and AI strategy, help them develop that, help them upskill their team, and then ultimately like help them install a more permanent leader. And that becomes sort of like a two-sided marketplace that I can build, and start like helping the people that I help to develop into leaders. I'm going to start installing them now. into jobs. And so I think that there's just like a lot of synergy between multiple things that I do.
Fucking DP.
Huh?
Oh yeah, I just heard the word synergy and I just like lost my mind. This is
I practiced it in the mirror earlier. So
the consultant and the VP skills coming in.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think there's a lot of there's a lot that can happen there. And hopefully, like if you're doing a good job of like installing people as leaders, like they probably going to want to work with you again in the future. And so it creates like a nice little flywheel of like future opportunity. So
you're almost like one step away from headhunter.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's a lot there. And also, I think a little bit down the road, I really want to write a book on sort of my management playbook and how to lead teams. It's a playbook that I've run like probably 5 or 6 times now, and it always works so well. And I want to like try it in lots of different places and like really pressure test it. And so I think consulting is like a good vehicle to do that and get a lot of case studies around that, so that when I actually write something, it's not bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably just start. Have you started a newsletter yet? Have you set up like ConvertKit?
I set it all up. I haven't like written anything on it yet, but I've set everything up.
Your ConvertKit, I'll make sure you're like a recommended follow. So when people, so ConvertKit basically allows you to have like recommended subscribers, and so anyone who subscribes to me will get recommended you, and then vice versa. It's like a nice way of.
All right, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I mean. Do you think the goal is to work on the book now, or is it mostly going to be like? I personally think that if you just released like a blog every time you do an expert call, every couple of times when it makes sense, using that to sort of build out the audience first and validate the pain points.
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly the kind of goal. And I think the reality is like I wouldn't say would be starting to work on the book now in a very serious sense, but definitely writing a lot of the content that's going to like be packaged up into that. But yeah, totally.
Because this is I'm just going to give unsolicited advice because I'm trying to do my reps too. But I think give feedback on Twitter, see what feedback or like provide alpha on Twitter, see what alpha like resonates with people, turn them into blog posts, and that can probably get you to building out like a cohesive course.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that I see it now is if I was to ever write a book, I would run an online course, and that online course is going to be like enough to just fund the book.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think what you'll find is like once you start doing consulting, it's like you're just writing for the company, and it's really hard to have the time to write the book. But I definitely think like next year, if I do the course twice, you could be like not working for 3 or 4 months, live off of that, and then actually go commit time.
Yeah,
and I think that's the flywheel that I think has been super valuable. Like I really underestimated the course, which is stupid because obviously everyone does a course.
Yeah.
There's a good product in your portfolio of info products, but I really underestimated it.
Yeah, I think like the reality is, what you kind of started with in like not understanding your value. This is the same thing I hear from every successful consultant of, you need to be able to decouple like how much you're getting paid from like the actual hours that you're working. And the way you get into that is like, hey, I'm going to do something that's going to help make you $1 million. That's very valuable to you. Let's not talk about the number of hours I'm putting into it. Let's talk about how much value I'm going to provide you instead. And when you start thinking about products like courses and stuff, that's something that further decouples your time because it's like a one-time cost more or less, and then a lot of payment. And this is also why people love SaaS subscription products. Like a lot of ways to kind of like generate more passive like revenue.
Yeah, I also realized too that and not even like dollars per hour, but just like the recurring revenue of any kind of like business, the value of that dollar is so different now. Like I don't like. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like I have like a job board. It makes like $2,000 a month, which is like like 3 consulting calls, but that is still way more valuable, right? To me, like that feels way better than, oh, if I just get it to like my rent, having a job board pay for rent is like blows my mind. Like I can't even. But there's job boards that are making like 4 million a year, but it just blows my mind. But then you realize, oh, this is why there are companies, and companies have different like PE multiples.
Yeah, totally.
The quality of revenue is different, and if once you look at yourself as a business, like it doesn't actually matter if you make $1,000 an hour, because like the multiples off that are different. Like, I would almost rather make $10,000 doing nothing than like $40,000 working 60 hours a week.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the attraction people have to something like consulting, or just like even running their own thing, is like having more control over your time. Yeah. And it's like, this is just kind of gets at the heart of that. Like the more that you can make money in ways where you don't have to tie it very explicitly to your time, the more you can spend your time doing other things. You're like creating ways for you to like design your own life. So
yeah. At some point,
so you can go take a spearfishing trip and
exactly. But yeah, I mean, this took me maybe like 18 months to arrive to that point. But it was like in the beginning, it was just purely about like, it was like purely hourly rate targets. Then it was like monthly revenue targets, and then it was like contract size targets. And now my only target is like, I only want to work 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Like,
see, yeah.
4 days a week of vacation every week is kind of the target. So let's jump into some of the questions you have, because I feel like we're just kind of rambling now.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, I think some of them we already maybe touched on a little bit. One of the things I'm kind of curious about is how you think about generating leads, and like what channels you're finding to be most effective with that.
Yeah. How I did it earlier on was just, I knew that my core, the easiest person to sell to for where I was in my like online presence was just anybody, because I didn't really have a big following on Twitter. I had like 500 followers, which are just friends I've gathered for the past couple of years. But there's this one good book called like One Page Marketing Book, and the first 3 questions they ask, like, what is your audience? What is the message you have for that audience? What platform do you use? And so I kind of realized early that my audience has to be VC. My audience has to be like seed, pre-seed companies that are VC backed, right? And the pain they had was just like investor pressures. You know what I mean? Like they raise the money, they have to spend it, and their investors want them to do something AI. I don't think that's the ideal customer now. One, because these people don't know what they actually want, and they can't value what they want because they don't know it. So then you sell like, I'll get you to seed, which doesn't feel real. Yeah. And so all of that was basically just writing blog posts on how to build things. But I would not go down, like if I could do it again, I would not go down that route.
Yeah.
Right? If I was in your shoes, I would basically just do all of my lead generation from network and referrals, and structure some kind of kickback if a contract is successful. Right? Because there's 4 ways to get leads that you can do: free content, paid ads, warm outbound, cold outbound. Both of us are unlikely to ever need cold outbound.
Yeah.
But for me, I was out of tech for 2 years, so I really couldn't do warm outreach.
Yeah.
But it was just like, hey, remember me from Jason from Data Hackers 10 years ago?
Yeah.
So I did free content, which was, I wrote 20 blog posts every 3 months, and 3 of them basically generated all of my revenue. But I think for you, like warm outbounds or some kind of affiliate thing would be sweet. Right. Yeah. Like, hey, Had, I work with a bunch of like VP of engineering, head of engineering folks that are interested in building out their AI capabilities. I noticed that you know person X and person Y from similar types of companies. I would love an introduction. I would love to see if I can like help them out. If you're not comfortable with that and making that introduction, can I like mention you when I reach out to them directly?
Yeah. And for people who don't know that are interested in doing this kind of thing, learn to use LinkedIn search, because you can easily structure a search to find your target audience who is a second degree connection, so you know exactly who to ask for an intro.
Exactly.
The number of people who don't know how to use LinkedIn search is crazy. It's so useful.
Oh yeah, I should really do that and just see. But anyways, yeah, I think for you it makes sense to just go to the referral path just because you're so established already.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still in. Like, it wasn't like I'm not established, but I left tech for so long that when I came back, I was like, I'll just write blogs. But the other thing is going to be blog posts.
Yeah,
I think blog posts are kind of the only way to really scale it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to write with the assumption that you're going to write 10 things and then 2 of them are going to account for all of your revenue.
Yeah.
I think 2 of my blog posts out of the 47 that I've written,
Mm-hmm.
2 of them have probably led to leads that have generated $300,000 worth of consulting work.
Wow.
But they also are the ones that took me 5 days to write versus 1 day to write.
That's at least optimistic, that the extra work you're putting in was worthwhile.
Yeah. But I think a lot of it is just the way that people describe it is the organic content is to get you equity. You never ask doing the organic content.
Mm-hmm.
And then the paid or the outbound is the value extraction from the equity that you give.
Mm-hmm.
So none of my blog posts ever mention that I'm a consultant.
Interesting. I would think you would always want to have a CTA. I maybe do you tell them to subscribe to your newsletter at least, or
yeah, now that's a
CTA.
CTA.
Okay. Yeah.
But,
okay.
Well, I'll say, this is something I learned through my consulting, and then I'm just gonna give you alpha, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened was when I did the course, I was like, by the way, guys, you've been reading my shit for a year.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time I'm gonna deliver a product to them en masse.
Yeah, you got to remind them of how much free value you've given them, so they feel guilty.
I don't even think it's free value. I think they just know. It's just so good. Why can't I? I think once you start spending more money on contractors, I think you should. Okay, this is another recommend. I think you should definitely just hire people from Upwork with the expectation they're gonna either fuck it up or blow your mind, because it really gives you a picture of what the other side feels like. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because the really good people, you're just can I pay you more to only work? Making that switch is very easy. Mm-hmm. And then you realize how few people are really good.
Oh yeah.
And so and on top of that, when people start paying you, you can still just directly share the free content, and as long as they get value from it, they're not oh, well, I didn't pay you to write this for me.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm not going to consider it in the equation of is Jason helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you can just cross pollinate. If you just do these calls and you say, okay, what are some mistakes people are making in building out their data engineering teams? Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to blog post that's how should early startups think about data engineering? Right. Mm-hmm. Then it's the audience, the CTO. Okay, you probably came from a big company. You're now working in a small company. You're asking yourself this question. You ask yourself this question because you have these 3 anxieties. Let me alleviate these 3 anxieties for you. And here's a piece of the playbook.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just gonna I write about this content. Here are my credentials. My goal is to help you not feel so stressed out. And eventually it'll just be oh, I just keep reading Skylar stuff. And then you just make a tweet one day that's I have 3 slots available.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when everything happens. It's that's incredible. I'm now lucky enough where I can just say anyone work in private equity, I'm gonna get 2 inbound.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It's once you have an audience, man, you can capitalize on it. It's great.
Yeah, I think it's just you just really have to find the audience and the message and make sure it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You're trying to help them accomplish a dream. You're trying to help them alleviate some pain. It's always just who's the audience? What is their dream? What is their pain? What is my message?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And everything was just like kind of grows organically.
Mm-hmm.
Just post everything on Hacker News.
Yeah, and hope you get to the front page. That way they can roast you.
It's great. Oh,
so I think like I get the sense that your goals are really to stay as like more of an indie consultant rather than building out into like a large firm. Do you have any like thoughts on like when someone should consider just building an indie practice versus like building out a firm with like multiple people?
yeah. I mean, I think right now I can command a high rate because I am just hard to find. But if that's why people pay me so much money, it's not like I can find another me. So I don't really have a system to train employees, right? Like you can probably train people to make landing pages.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can probably like pay someone less money, train them up, and like upskill them.
Yeah.
But I think what we're doing, it's hard to like train. Like how do you like this is the advice stuff is just so hard to train up because it's like you either make it super generic, but I'm not sure if I offered someone like a 23-year-old that like is just graduated. If I was like, you can talk to them for $100 an hour, and you can talk to me for $1,000 an hour, I think most people would still pick the 1,000 because I haven't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely like finding people is like difficult. I remember at LinkedIn, my colleagues and I used to joke that it might be more cost effective to invest in cloning tech rather than recruiting.
Yeah.
Just because it's so hard to like find good people. And I think there's some level of I think I have like a little bit of a different perspective given that a lot of my roles have been like very more like management focused on like upskilling people. And so I have a lot of like playbooks for like how you upskill someone and to be another maybe not quite adjacent, but you know, like to be better. But I think there is a difficulty in that it's hard to get to that level without really being in the trenches. Like
and then
you don't get there just by reading a bunch of thought leadership bullshit, you know, like
and like the people who are at that level, like they could just go somewhere and get like incredible offers. Like I don't think I could. Like even if I said like you get to kill like eat what you kill, you could make so much money consulting. It's like yeah, but like OpenAI pays me like $1 million a year. It's like,
for real.
Like okay, well, damn. Okay, yeah, you're right. Like why would I? Like, there's no way I could even hire you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and if that was the case, like maybe if I said okay, I'll manage all your sales and your lead gen, and I'll find you a copywriter. I would be taken off as like 15% off the top. Hiring you is not a 96% margin business. Hiring you is like 10% margin business.
Yeah.
In which case I might as well just be selling like drop shipping. Like
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like your margins end up, you know, I think there's a point at which like you can think about expanding like your operations, but like it definitely starts to cut into your margins in a really significant way. And so it like begs the question of like, is it even worth doing it at all? Like,
yeah. Like I just, because again, we're not venture backed, right? Like if it was venture backed, yeah, just fucking spend money and figure it out.
Yeah.
But you know, I think it's like the past couple of months, it's like I'm averaging like $100,000 a month, and then my operating costs are like $25,000. That's really great margin. That's like the best business ever. But if I hired you, I bet I could be paying you like $50,000-$60,000. You know, and then that means I'm negotiating like $70,000 monthly contracts.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes like so much more complicated. Right.
So maybe like a different flavor. Do you like because I think like at this point you kind of have a somewhat of a network of other indie consultants kind of in a similar space. Do you ever like collaborate with projects?
I've collaborated with some very senior people, but like they're all like equals. Like I don't really like delegating. Because like, so for example, I could say, oh, let's do a contract. I'm gonna do all those sales, and we'll split it like 55, 45, and I want the extra 5 because I got the lead, I got the generation. That's very different than going, Scholar, like, what's your availability? Can you
Mhm.
do this project for me? Right? Like, I think that's going to be really hard for anyone who's like
Yeah.
that level. Like, but even then, it's like I just think I just can't offer the same stability, even for like an L4 employee. Like, they're gonna be better off
Totally.
working in a company.
Totally.
Like, I can't develop them. I can't grow them. Like, there's a lot of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
Totally.
it's easy to hire like final products, but
So how do you think, like, in those cases where you're collaborating, you kind of like touched on a little bit, like, how do you think about splitting the revenue in those cases?
honestly, I've not thought about it too much
Mm-hmm.
because I think like I don't think the system is just like 50-50,
Yeah.
but it's still hard to figure out what that is. For the most part, it's been on a case by case basis, right? Like, I don't know if you just say, well, like, let's just allocate 20% is like sales.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if there's that much revenue to split, the sales process is months.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to negotiate even a $200,000 enterprise contract, you might spend like an hour every other week for 2 months writing proposals, getting proposals denied, rewriting those things. That takes time. Definitely believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really have any good answers for that, unfortunately, because I just find that my advisory strategic consulting work is like such a more reliable and comfortable way of generating revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get the courses and education, like the economics just blow up.
Yeah. Yeah. The reach gets pretty crazy there, I imagine. So
In which case, like, I would rather not do 50% of half or 50% of look at engagement. It might make more sense to say, oh, like there's opportunity to do like a leadership workshop where like every CTO pays $2,000 to come to a hotel for 1 day. Like, you just like, you know what I mean? Like, how you make $100,000 is not how you make $1 million, but how you make $1 million is not how you make like $100 million. Like, it's not more of the same thing. It's like a different thing altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's answer some questions, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Do you think writing deep technical blog posts will also help, or should we write strategic type blog posts that showcase experience in a core field? So, I think the issue is neither. If you only write deep technical blog posts, I think it oftentimes makes people good employees, right? Because the technical work is oftentimes going to be like the list of actions you can take, and you can take really good actions. But so it's like it kind of gets you to be a very good contractor, right? That can address this thing. I think it's good to write a mix of not only technical content, but focusing on how the technical content can drive business outcomes. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you're at a blog post that's like 3 things that are going to change in AI, you're probably not going to get hired anywhere. But if it was like, here are 3 things I did around optimizing the PyTorch kernel, you're also not going to get hired. Right. I think that's like a tough balance to make, because if you did like the technical blog post, again, that's just like, why wouldn't Meta just hire you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like the way I always think about writing content has always in a consulting setting is like really just building credibility. And so I think like part of the answer to this depends on when you were talking earlier about that marketing book you read about like, who is your audience, you know, and like what things do you need to bring credibility that you have knowledge about? Mm-hmm. And that, I think that will be kind of like an angle too.
Yeah, exactly. Have you done any paid ads for lead gen? I did paid ads for my course, which is kind of lead gen. Right? But that, again, it's like, because I've already developed so much goodwill with the audience, people believe in the fact that the course is going to be useful, and then you can do that. But I've never done paid ads for consulting. I think for consulting, the right angle is probably going to be closer to free content.
Yeah, I can't imagine seeing an ad like as somebody who would hire consultants in my role as a VP. I can never imagine like seeing an ad and being like, "Oh yeah, this sounds good." Like, I think like if I'll say a corollary. If you're like in a VP position and you see an ad and you think that that's a good route, you probably suck as a VP, because like you should have the network that allows you to go find great consultants.
But here's the angle. If you saw an ad for like courses that your employees could take,
Totally.
like that LTV over CAC makes sense.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense to drop $100,000 on an ad.
Yeah.
That said, too, I think the other thing that's really valuable is what would happen if you got free content, right? What happens with the VPs and the free content is this guy's blog post keeps showing up on my goddamn like Slack AI channel.
Yeah.
Who is this guy, right? My employees keep sending me these blog posts. Who is this guy? And then they go on the website and they see consulting. Like, oh, what? Like, who is this guy? But they have already built the equity of like, oh, wow, everyone in my company is already being helped by the content. Right.
Totally.
And like, that's where you have to make sure that the technical content and the strategic content is trying to solve somebody's problem. Because the way you want it to be shared isn't like, isn't this guy so funny? It's, oh, we've been running into a problem for the past couple of weeks and I found this blog post that could help us. Let's go invest. Right. And that's how you pay that.
Totally.
But yeah, like the highest conversion really is just my whole team has read your blogs. Can you just help us? Like, I don't want to wait for more blogs.
Totally.
And that's where having the other 40 blogs that are not popular still be useful. Because the two blogs is the problem everyone has. But then what I do is after these calls, like, oh, it sounds like you're actually running into a bunch of hiring problems. Here's like 2 posts I wrote about hiring that basically no one reads because there's just not that many people who are hiring in the world. Like, there's no way that gets 40,000 views.
Yeah.
But you're like, oh, fuck, like I was thinking about hiring. This is super, super valuable.
Yeah, for sure. So given like some of the constraints you like laid out in terms of like, you know, you want to work 3 days a week right now. And you said a little bit about the types of engagements that are most interesting to you right now. Like, how are you thinking about kind of like expanding your business, or like what's really next for you in your consulting biz? So
I don't really have goals anymore because I never like accomplished a goal and felt happier afterwards. So I don't think about that too much. The thing I think about instead is, are the problems I'm seeing problems I want to solve? For example, a lot of people are coming to me and asking me to help hire head of AI. Well, that's a recruiting business. Do I want to be in the recruiting business? Another thing is a lot of people come to me and ask for help with hiring DevRel. That's like the writing content creation business. Do I want to be a part of that? So now my question is like, of these opportunities, which ones make better businesses? Right? Like, could I actually be ideas guy and hire like 3 Python devs and 3 writers and actually do like a content creation business where I'm not the face of it? Right? Like, that's an agency. Are the margins good? Like, does that make sense? Right? If I take like a 20% margin off a business that takes 1 day a week to basically like maybe like 4 hours every week of giving ideas and 4 hours every week of giving feedback, does the cash flows make sense? Like, that's the level I'm thinking about it at now. It's not even like AI thing specifically. It's like, what is actually a good business? Whereas if I write a book and the book makes $2,000 a month, I think it's a great business.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like it's the quality of the dollar now. It's like a weird thing I'm thinking about. Yeah, Ian said 20% margin on content creation is awful. Yeah, but I got to figure out like what that means, right? Is it 20%? Is it 40%? If it's 40%, I feel like I could pay my employees more money. Like,
yeah. So what types of engagements right now are you finding the most engaging or the most interesting?
Man, a lot of it. Let me think. the ones that are the most fun are the ones where like I am planning to make some large investments. Is with AI. Just tell me all the gotchas, because that's kind of where it's just you're just being paid to sort of share the war stories, and you know they're valuable because you know how much you wasted or you fucked up making those mistakes.
Yeah,
And it's like
absolutely.
it's always like, here's what I did and what I should have done, because that saved me 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And 6 months with a team of 3 people is a fuck ton of money. Like there's
Yeah.
like I'm gonna ask for 10% of what I would have saved, and then I feel
Mm-hmm.
confident offering that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you just like call me, I'll pay you $1,000 an hour to call me. I don't know if that's worth it, but oh, you want to build out some rec sys, you want to build out a team, I can definitely save you like 6 months. 4 people, that's like $1 million, right? I want $100,000 for the next 3 months or so. I set this up. It's a good. You can actually believe it's a good deal.
The Rexus mercenaries.
Yeah, I mean, just rags to riches. This is an interesting question. Many AI projects are staff augmentation and not project-based. How do you find project-based clients if you don't know how to wrap a project? I think that's where you kind of run into like the agency world of like having to hire many people. That's just something that doesn't really excite me too much, because I don't want to build the same thing 10 times. Like if you're gonna do that, then I just think about building a framework or a company afterwards.
Yeah. I would say on this, because like it sounds like the question is like how do you find project-based clients? I think a lot of it comes back to your marketing and positioning. Like I don't know if Jason has similar experience to me, but as I've started to kind of like dig into consulting, nobody's coming to me with like a staff augmentation thing, because like there's cheaper resources basically. Like you would never go to the person that's like last title was VP of engineering and data science to be like, hey, do you want to come be an MLE on this project kind of thing?
Yeah.
So a lot of it has to do with like the sort of audience you've built, the target persona that you're targeting, and sort of how you've built up your credibility to align with that. On top of that, I would also, I think where I see a lot of people fall down, and this is kind of like, Jason mentioned the story where like, early on, he like said like, hey, maybe somewhere between 150 and 170, like, oh, we'll pay you 170. And then he realized like, oh, I could have charged more. I think the reality is people are often, I mean, I don't know how inappropriate it can be on your live stream, but like most people don't have the balls to just like literally, ask for more.
I never had the balls. Like I always have to believe my price. Like
and so I think there's not only do you need to build credibility externally to other people, you have to build your own internal credibility of like, you need to believe it too. And really you just have to set a hard line on that, I think. Because the reality is like anytime someone comes to me and says like, oh, like what is your hourly rates? I'd be like, no, we're not doing that. Like,
I mean, I don't even think I've set a line in the sense that like externally I have a confidence. For me now, it's like I just believe in the prices I'm offering. And the way I do that is I ask better questions, right? Like you can ask like, okay, like what, like, so the questions I often ask, like, what is at stake in your business, right? It's never just like, oh, I need a 10% improvement in output for the team. It's actually end up being like, oh, we're hemorrhaging money because of retention and churn, right? It's like, oh, what do you think the company could gain if we can deploy this actually successfully? Oh, we plan to like raise a Series B, and we think this is something that can unlock, a large percentage of TAM. And then it becomes, okay, what are you willing to invest to like open up TAM by like 20%? What are you willing to invest to improve the conversion of this funnel? And then if you do that, you realize that like marketers and recruiters are probably being paid way more than you are, because the marketers and the recruiters price themselves in a way that is accountable for the outcomes. Right? If the recruiter can't find you the headcount, they don't get paid. Right? And the fact that you're doing hourly means that independent of whether you get the outcome, you do get paid. So there's a balance of like accountability and risk on your side as well. Right? And so it's like, if you're doing staff augmentation, it probably means you haven't actually asked enough questions to understand the specifics of the problem, right? Because Skylar could charge, like, I could charge Skylar $200 an hour for like tips on consulting, and that just never ends.
Mm-hmm.
But if I said, like, I think I can get you like $100,000 contract, but I want like 10K to do it, the question is like, if Skylar's only been doing 50K contracts, I can double his revenue, and he only needs to give up like 20% of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Deal feels different, right? Because I'm not just gonna give you advice, and it's like, and like if I give you bad advice, you keep coming back. That's also not the right. You don't want to do that either, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a different way that you can structure it to make it more project based, and usually the project based ones are going to be outcomes based.
Right? Yeah, and I think like in that there's a level of explaining the value to your potential client, because you're saying here like, hey, I'm taking, like, you don't actually care about my hours, you care about the outcome. I'm going to assume some risk of that outcome, and so like the closer you get to assuming that risk, the more high risk, high reward kind of mentality.
This is a good question too. Would you view constraining what you offer, or could you see building AI POCs as a reasonable path? It's like, if you just build the POC, what you're selling is a list of tasks, and that's where you get more stuck in like the hourly rate. But if you restructure it as like, okay, we'll build you a thing that can get you your first couple of paying customers. And if you actually believe that you could build it in a way that makes that more likely, then it's like, okay, like what's your first couple of customers worth? You're doing enterprise contracts, like what's actually going on? But it's like up to you to like ask more questions and figure out what they're actually trying to do. For example, some people just want a POC so they can raise a seed round. In which case, like if you believe in the product and you think they could raise the money, and you think there are extra things that you can do above and beyond just delivering the POC to get them closer to raising the thing, you can just say, like, you know what? If your goal is to like raise this money, I want to be a part of that success. If my job is just build apps for you, I can't be accountable for that success. In which case, yeah, maybe I'll do it for like 20 grand or $200 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're coming to me because you think I'm the only person that can build you something that in the next 2 months, so you can raise your $3 million, that's a different ask. Mm-hmm. And the question is like, could you actually deliver that though? Right? It's like, I could try because I can probably put in like, oh well, I can get you to your Series A because I can introduce you to people who to give you feedback on their presentation. I can help you find a designer so it's a little bit prettier. I can introduce you to investors. But maybe I want 20K up front, and when you raise the money, I want 50K. Right? And that is a very different offer than just building the application, because that doesn't actually get you the outcome. It's just like a task. Right? Anyways, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but
totally.
What other stuff's been on your mind? Are you close to like getting a contract now? Have you been like thinking about your offers and?
Yeah. So I think I have a few. I'm more in the position where I have high confidence in the conversion for all of these, because none of these people have a strong enough network to find other people, and they really need this. But it's more, I'm stuck in a like, which of these do I want to take? I'm definitely a little cautious about taking on too much too soon, because I think if I like take on 5 contracts all at the same time, like that's going to be hard as I'm getting my processes and everything like ironed out.
You're going to be like at 2 a.m. building out like
paperwork,
and then you're just onboarding to 3 different companies.
Yeah. So I'm trying to kind of like, I'm more in a position where I'm trying to pick one that I'm the most interested in to start with, and try to kind of like push the others out a little bit, give myself a little spacing.
Create scarcity and urgency.
Yeah. Yep.
Listen,
so I'm going to use that to drive prices.
Like next day, you pay extra for next like 1 day delivery. Let's think about that. You could.
Yeah. Totally.
Like, hey, for 30 grand, I'll
do
this.
Speed is a value. Speed is a value, So like that's something that can be in your like little package.
Yeah. No, speed is massively a value.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I would love to see you have an offer that's like, I can start this October when I have more availability, but you know,
That's a good point. I wasn't like really consciously thinking about that, but that's probably like what I'll start sending out. So I think I probably this week will be sending out 3 proposals, I think.
and each one has options.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Price anchors.
I haven't figured out what prices yet, but yeah, I still need to like hash all that out. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
but yeah, so I'm pretty excited for it. I think I had enough lead gen before I jumped in to kind of like really jumpstart it. So
That's a product market fit right there.
yeah.
What are the kinds of outcomes you're trying to drive? Is it just like, we're going to get you the VP?
I think that is more of like a thing I think people need for longevity.
Mhm.
I think the reality is like most of these companies I'm talking to, they have an internal engineering team, they might have some data people, but
Mhm.
none of them they're definitely in like there's one company I'm talking to where it's like very clear that they have like a very data and AI based product, but they're already hitting scaling issues like really early on, and I don't think they quite have like the capabilities internally to kind of
Mhm.
like fix it. And so a lot of it is really just like helping them chart a course
Mhm.
and then upskilling them so that they can kind of manage it themselves. So I think like really like the exact outcome is going to vary a little bit, but it's definitely still focused on like this is what it's going to unlock in your business. So depending on like what the core KPIs, the business tracks are, it'll
Mhm.
vary based on that. But I think the added bit that like, hey, I'm going to come and install a more permanent leader. That's more of a like, hey, it's not going to be like I help you fix this thing and then go away and then you lose all that KPI that decays over time. I'm going to make sure that it's like maintained for the long term.
Dude, if you had an offer that like prices that as like a credit hunter, that'd be so amazing. Just like, oh, if I help you, if I help you the VP, I got like 25% or 20% off of the discount, right? 20% versus your salary if they stay for 3 months.
Yep. Yeah. So that's exactly the way to price it. So
that'd be so cool. Damn. Yeah, I mean, yeah, one of the other questions I've been trying to be better at asking is just like, okay, if this engagement is successful, if we talk about this like next year, we're not really talking about like, oh, the employees are upskilled, or like, well, like what are they actually talking about? It's always like, no, we raised the money and we got to Series A and we found product market fit. It's like, okay, how much do you believe that?
Yeah.
Like, how confident am I able to actually deliver that to you?
Totally. And it's funny thinking about that because as I talk to you and every other person that's consulting, everybody talks about getting into that mindset very quickly. But I feel like having been in a role as a VP, that's the mindset I've had to operate in. Everything comes down to like what is the business value here, and so it very much is already intuitive for me. So it's been cool.
Yeah, man, I can't sell illicit tests. Even like, oh my god, literally a month ago, like a company was like, "Oh, how much do you charge?" And I was like, $14,000 a month for like 4 hours of calls. And like, okay, send us the contract. And I was like, fuck.
Yeah,
How? Like, I'm like
that quick of an okay, you.
Yeah. I like literally what I got up and apologized to my girlfriend. I was like, I just took food out of both their mouths.
I'm dead.
Thoughts on contracting versus consulting? I think the real difference is contracting to me feels a lot more like selling those list of tasks, and consulting is trying to get you towards like specific outcomes, right? Like, I don't think the bricklayer, like if someone's laying bricks to build a house, I don't think they'll ever really think of themselves as like a consultant, right? But if I start thinking about like where do we build the next couple of properties? How can we position these as like short-term rentals in order to like maximize something? And then how can I help you raise the money from these like funds to actually go build the thing? And how can I help you find the architects? And then how can I find the developers? Those like larger scale problems is how I think about consulting compared to the contracting work. is independent consulting. Do you run parallel contracts? Oh yeah, totally. I run like at my worst, I ran like 6 different clients because each one took about 4 to 5 hours a week. So it ended up being just like a full work day.
Yeah.
But I realized I just want free time. Like I just don't think it made sense for me to like try to push it more aggressively. I don't have any.
Yeah, I imagine it's like hard to make it work without running multiple contracts in parallel from like a financial perspective. Because like even though you can get contracts that are kind of big, they might be spread over like a longer period of time. And so like you're in a very different world. Like if you are in the position where you can command rates of like over like 3 months of like upper 6 figures or something, like you're in a very different world, and probably your lifestyle is much more extravagant and requires more contracts.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, I don't know. I think very quickly I was like, okay, in order for me to really believe that I'm not trading my time for money, I have to limit how much time I spend and see if I can still create it. Like if it's just the case that I work twice as much and I make twice as much, I'm not actually doing any structured like value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
Do you section it out based on a day or run parallel based on a few hours per day? I mean, I think the real goal is like you're just not actually tied to those times. Like usually what I sell is I sell like an hour or 2 a week of meetings, and then all the other deliverables are asynchronous. And so I can like work a weekend if I want to. If I want to like get some help, I can have one of my employees help with the writing of it, help with some outlines. Mm-hmm. My job still is just how can I help them focus on what's actually important, and always be thinking about like what is actually going to help them, right? Like keeping myself busy is not helping them, right? And so you just got to think about that a little bit more. What other questions do you have, Scott?
I mean, I could talk forever. Let me see. What did we not answer? What do you think your most painful lesson you've learned from starting this consulting business?
Not being clear about time boundaries, and being like too available.
Mm-hmm.
Like the example was I was helping people hire, and I was doing a lot of interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was like, I just shared like a calendar that was like a 9 to 5 calendar for like all days of the week. So I was like, oh, I want to be very available because I want to like offer you the best service. Some people like took advantage of that and like started booking me interviews, like 5 interviews in a day or something like that. Right? Because like, yeah, I totally understand. Like my job is to help you get to your hire, but actually, for how much I'm charging it, that wasn't the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
just kind of like not be less available, but really it was just like pricing myself wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because if like I was helping them hire 4 people plus the head of AI, if I took 20% off that's $250,000. So if someone gets $250,000, you need to be available every fucking day for the next 3 months.
Yeah,
I would take it.
Definitely a lot of wisdom about like how to price effectively. And I think also it's kind of like, it sounds like you're getting at not necessarily even just the hours, but sort of how many hours in a day you might be expected to put in. Yeah. And then something about how much control they have over your time on like what sort of like notice. And it's like all of that, like the more that you have to take the volatility from them, that's like risk, right? Yes. So it's like you're taking volatility of them scheduling any time, scheduling perhaps like a lot in one day. That means you should be charging a lot more.
Yeah. I definitely think so, right? It's like, you know, like they were booking meetings in like different time zones, and so I would be in San Francisco and book a meeting at 8 a.m. New York time, and I was like, you just set up a meeting for me at like 5 a.m. Like, you didn't even ask.
You know,
it's my fault, but also not my fault because I didn't update everything. But then, but you see what I mean, right?
Yeah.
I think getting an EA helped a lot with that.
Yeah, that's something. That was one of the first pieces of advice you gave me to, don't wait too long to get an EA. So I already started looking into it.
Yeah, because after I got the EA, she was just like, did you notice the 3 meetings at 6 a.m.? I was like, what? It's like, yeah, they've all accepted already. It's like, oh, what the? That's not.
Oh my god. Yeah.
And so I like deleted the calendar thing. And it's like, if you send the calendar and it's really limited, you're just kind of like an asshole, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, fuck you, no, you're kind of an asshole. But they're like having an EA is like also adds some kind of like hedge because they can be the one that's pushing back.
Yeah, totally. You know, one of the things I've found kind of helpful for this, I've been using this tool to like manage my work called Motion AI, and it allows you to create booking links. But it has a lot of nice rules you can add of like, hey, I'm only going to take like one of these per day or something. And so like, you can set a lot of constraints around it. That way you don't, because I sent some of my booking links out to a lot of people and I was like, all right, I need to like make sure I chill out and not have to do like too much in one day. Cause like,
I mean, if have I ever shared you my calendar in like January and February?
No, I'm kind of scared to see it, but let's go.
let me see some like terrible ones. And like the worst part is like people aren't conscious of like defragging your calendar, and so you get into a position where like you just get a bunch of gap teeth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the tool that I use also allows you to configure that, like how much gap space you want in between things, and so it's pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna just dox myself, but like it was like this.
Oh, this doesn't even look that bad.
It's bad for me, right? Like I have to also like write stuff, like make sure to eat. It's like it's just violence. But
I feel like I've tried to put eating in my calendar before, and I never follow it. Like,
yeah. But like those interruptions are super bad. I don't know, but having an EA has really been like the biggest learning. Nice. And then the other and just hiring someone who's experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you hire someone who's not experienced, you're just delegating more, but you're like delegating the delegator. Yeah, I've hired some like, hiring is always hard.
For sure.
What's in any consultant? Are you able to share more about how consulting with companies like Meta look like? I never consulted with Meta, but I've consulted for like billion. Yeah, I know. I've consulted with some companies that are like $1 billion valuations. It's just a lot more process. Like I realized that the sweet spot is kind of A to C, Series A to C. Seed companies don't really know what they want yet. It's not guaranteed they have product market fit. After A, you have metrics. After C, you have like a chief legal officer, and there's like other things that become much more difficult to work with, and just onboarding gets really complicated. But I think they're like, just companies that don't have enough brand to have like a super easy time recruiting has been like a nice place to have a wedge.
Makes sense.
But it's still the same thing. It's just like understanding, like, what are the actual problems they're looking into, and why do you think they're currently unable to do it? And sometimes it's as much as like, you guys don't actually have a KPI for the success of this product, and each team has too many isolated metrics, and this is why there's separation. And I don't even notice, but like these 3 teams work with 3 different products that should be using the same backend, but they're not. And there's just a lot of like tech debt that we need to address.
Mm-hmm.
And the employees can definitely say that, but it's just not heard as much.
Yeah. That's why McKinsey is so, popular. They go around and, find the things people on the ground are saying and say it with credibility.
Truly, I definitely feel that too. What's the best way to support inbound outreach? Public calendar for intro calls, email on your website. Does it really even matter? I think the first thing you should make sure you're also doing is qualifying leads. So it's like, if you have nobody, you might feel like, oh, actually, I'll talk to anybody. But very quickly, you'll realize that not many people are a good fit. And even having something that makes them answer like one or two highly predictive questions is super beneficial, right? Like, I just asked a question, what's at stake in your business? And if they have nothing at stake, I can't take the call with you, right? Like, it's not to pick my brains. Like, no, Jason, we are losing money, or we need to do this, or, you know, we have been struggling to hire an MLE. It's like, okay, there's a problem. Then I can try to solve it. But if you want to like pick my brain and whatnot, it's really useful to do it early on, because that's just content. I think really quickly it becomes a lot of noise, and it's a lot of distractions, because then you start thinking about doing 3 other things that are just not as good, right? It's like earlier in January, I was thinking of doing like a course, scaling up my consulting, doing a course with some biases, starting a newsletter. It just becomes too many things, and it becomes a huge distraction.
Yeah. Corollary to that is, if you don't know which questions to ask, you don't know your audience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But just like, why are you in pain?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's been super helpful. What else? I know you got to go in a couple.
Yeah, I think we covered everything that I kind of had here, you know, and everything from our earlier conversation. So got all my tools and everything set up from our earlier conversation. So, but yeah, this was cool. This is super fun.
I'm really excited. If you ever want me to look at your proposals, I think that could benefit me.
Yeah. When I put one together, I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Very exciting. All right, I'm gonna sign off. Go to the pool.
Awesome.
And chat a little bit. All right.
For sure. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you jumping on.
Later.